There's pretty much been no point in my life where I ever believed in religion at all. I think the impulse that drives some people to religion is the same impulse that I have to push my limits. If I mess up and fall off this, it's all on me.
In 2007, an unknown Alex Honnold arrived in Yosemite Valley and immediately carved out a name for himself within the rich history of Yosemite climbing. He started by free soloing Yosemite's Astroman and the Rostrum in a day, matching Peter Croft's legendary 1987 feat. A year later, he soloed the 1,200-foot finger crack that splits Zion's Moonlight Buttress, an achievement so groundbreaking people thought the news was a joke. 5 months later, he took things even further when he soloed the 2,000-foot northwest face of Half Dome, and his life of climbing culminated in the Oscar-winning film Free Solo, when he breezed through the 2,900-foot face of El Capitan in just under 4 hours. Without a doubt, one of the greatest athletic feats of any kind ever. While brainstorming a video about Alex, I could never find anything more interesting than the generic "how does he overcome his fear" theme that has been beaten to death. Luckily, I came across a talk from Paul Vanderklay and Dr. Jim, where they connected the movie Free Solo to Soren Kierkegaard's book, Fear and Trembling, and instantly a light bulb went off in my head. In this philosophical work, Kierkegaard interprets the story of Abraham, and how God commands him to sacrifice his only son Isaac as an offering to God. Without protest or question, Abraham lays Isaac upon the altar and raises his knife to kill him. Only then does the angel of God stop Abraham, pointing out a ram to be sacrificed in Isaac's place. It is a strange story that is almost incomprehensible to our modern age. What Abraham does is insane, and the thought of killing our own child is something we just cannot relate to. Isaac is the promise of the future, and it is that very future Abraham is told to sacrifice. It is for this reason Kierkegaard says Abraham has been labeled as the father of faith. Because the moment he raises his knife to kill Isaac, he sacrifices everything to a calling that no one else can know or understand. Like Abraham's call to sacrifice his son, Alex's goal is insane, even in the eyes of the best climbers in the world. No matter how prepared he was, as soon as he leaves the ground with nothing but his climbing shoes and a chalk bag, there is no certainty that he will live to see another day. This is why Alex is possibly the best modern example of what Kierkegaard called the Knight of Faith, an individual who is completely incomprehensible to the rest of the world. Often referred to as Spock or No Big Deal Honnold, Alex seems used to being misunderstood. His free soloing career essentially began when he was too nervous to meet climbing partners, and climbing without a rope seemed like the safer alternative. But while preparing for his monumental ascent of El Cap, Alex's life was drastically different from that shy, awkward kid he used to be. He had learned how to hug and make friends. He had a new girlfriend, notoriety, and many climbing achievements to his name. His life appears to be something more meaningful than what he had before. Most people would take the fame, the family, and the moderately successful dentist-level cash he was pulling in and ride off into the sunset. But Alex's motivations are not the same as our own, and that is precisely what allowed him to achieve the impossible. A central theme in Kierkegaard's thought is the idea that each of us is fully responsible for our decisions, and that certain decisions are fundamentally definitional of the kind of person we are. As Alex is staring up at El Cap, ready to make his climb, he is standing at a crossroads that will determine his destiny. He can turn back, abandon the climb, and take that beautiful, cozy life most of us would choose in a heartbeat. Or he can begin the climb, which can end one of two ways. He falls, and he is remembered as a tragic but heroic story. Or he lives, and he becomes something else. Kierkegaard makes a distinction between the tragic hero and the Knight of Faith. The tragic hero gives up everything in what he calls the movement of infinite resignation. To understand what Kierkegaard means by this, we must look at the philosophy his book was written in response to, and that was the philosophy of Hegel. Kierkegaard finds a distinction between three ways of life: the aesthetic, the ethical, and the religious. The aesthetic is the life of felt experience, ranging from lust to a sublime appreciation of art. At each level, the aesthetic life is the life of the single individual living out his or her own experience. The ethical life transcends the personal and is based instead on what Hegel calls the absolute mind. This is the life of the tragic hero, who abandons individual pleasures in service of the greater good. The religious life, like the aesthetic, works on the level of the single individual, but here the individual is in a direct relationship with God or a higher calling, which cannot be explained or justified on an ethical level. The highest goal for the single individual, according to Hegel, is to lose oneself in the universal. We must annul our personal desires and ambitions and be motivated exclusively by the general interest of all. Naturally, Kierkegaard, who prized the individual, was repelled by this communitarian ethic. Kierkegaard says Abraham cannot be seen as a tragic hero because his act does nothing for the greater good. It is an individual experience that Abraham cannot share with anyone. Kierkegaard goes on to say that from an ethical or universal standpoint, Abraham is nothing but a murderer, since there is no ethical justification for his action. This leaves us with two possible scenarios. Either Abraham is a murderer, or he has a personal relationship with the divine that stands above the ethical. Like most of Kierkegaard's writing, he leaves it to his reader to decide. In many ways, Alex could be just as admirable if he had abandoned the climb and taken this new life. But because Alex is who he is, there's only one decision he was ever going to make. And that decision is what makes him the Knight of Faith. Like the tragic hero, the Knight of Faith also makes the movement of infinite resignation. But he makes another movement as well, the leap of faith, where he gets everything back by virtue of the absurd. Faith goes beyond all reason. It is not a decision based on evidence. No such evidence could ever be enough to completely justify the total commitment involved in things like religious faith, romantic love, or deciding to climb El Cap without a rope. Faith involves making that commitment anyway, and it is in that sense that faith is absurd. It cannot be explained, and it cannot be justified. Kierkegaard thought that to have faith is at the same time to have doubt. It takes no faith to believe that a pencil or a table exists when one is looking at it and touching it. Faith can only exist where there is doubt. Faith and doubt, unlike science or logic, are meaningless without personal experience. Descartes attained doubt, but only by means of a long and difficult process following years of study. Similarly, Alex's faith in himself came only after a lifetime of commitment to his goal. We cannot take his experience and use it as our own. Each of us must walk the path on our own, and Kierkegaard claims that is the highest goal we can strive to attain. Before, Abraham had Isaac, but his connection to his son could be separated by death, distance, or time. By losing and then regaining Isaac, Abraham is able to see his son and everything else on this earth as a temporary gift. Alex also gave up everything, all hopes of life and love, and the moment he topped out on El Cap, he won it all back. That is the perspective the Knight of Faith is able to attain, to regain all of what one has given up, and in doing so, to appreciate it for the first time, fully and completely.